What is up, everybody? Hey, my name is Ryan, and welcome to our Reflections podcast. And I'm here in our podcast studio, which is really Mike Lauer's office. So, what's up, Mike? Mike is right over here. He's running the soundboard. He's got his headphones on. He does all the editing too. So, if you see Mike Lauer, the infamous or the famous, whichever it is these days, give him a high five. Hey, I want to tell you this. One of my favorite story, I think, hands down, probably my favorite story in the Bible, is the story of the lost son, or the prodigal son, you could call it. But really, it's the lost son. And some folks don't know this, but this story is actually a story amongst three stories. And when you interpret any one of the three, you have to read them all together. So there's three stories of three lost items, and the third one being the son. So that's why they call it the lost son. And the story of the lost son, you probably know this. It goes like this. A young man wants his inheritance, which is equivalent to kind of telling his father he wishes he was dead. So he goes to the father, hey, I want my inheritance. Again, the same as just saying, I wish you were dead. And the inheritance, which belonged to the whole community, the father gives it to him. Son takes off, spends it all, wastes all of it on wild living, it says in the text. Wild living, which is, I don't know what that means, but I can imagine. And then wakes up in the middle of this pig pen, horrible place for a Jewish kid to wake up amongst the pigs, and says, man, even the slaves or the servants at my father's house are living better than this. Maybe I can beg my father and he'll welcome me back home. That's the story of the lost son, the prodigal son. It's one of three lost items. So when you read them, you got to read them all together. So this is in Luke 15. The first story that Jesus tells is the parable or the story of the lost sheep. Then there's the story of the lost coin. The lost sheep goes like this. There's a shepherd who has a sheep. He's got 100 of them, and one of them wanders off, as sheep are prone to do. Sheep are dumb. Like, really, they're dumb, which is funny because we get called sheep a lot in the Bible. So I'm like, who are you talking to, Jesus? You talking to me? Yes, dummy. I think he means that lovingly, but you know what I mean. So there's 99 sheep. One wanders off out of the 100. And the shepherd has to leave the 99 to go and find the one. And it says that he will look everywhere until he finds it. So he won't stop until he finds it. When he finds it, he will joyfully put it on his shoulders. And I imagine that sheep is like kicking and like being like, let me down. I wandered off. I want to be out here. And the shepherd's like, no, you don't know what you're doing. Because that sheep, if a sheep ever is left alone like that, especially in the wilderness in Israel, it'll get eaten. It won't last very long. But even sheep here, I've been told by a woman who owns a bunch of sheep, so yeah, if a sheep ever wanders off and they're alone, they'll never live. They'll die quickly. So the shepherd knows better, drags the sheep back, calls all of his friends and neighbors like, hey, let's rejoice. I found my sheep that was lost. Then there's the story of the lost coin. A woman, in this case, has a coin and she loses it. And so she lights a lamp, sweeps the whole house, and searches carefully all day, or really until she finds it. And then when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors and like, rejoice, I found my coin that was lost. And by the way, the God character in all of these, the lost son, it's the father. So if you want to know what God is like, read that story and look at the father. In the lost sheep, it's the shepherd. So read that story as though God was the shepherd. And then, of course, in the lost coin, it's the woman. So the woman is the God character. So read about the woman and you'll see what God is like. But here's the cool thing about all these stories. I love this. The one thing never in question is the belonging of the items. Look, all the items get lost or wander off or are just misplaced, but their belonging is never in question. So the son never is not the son. The father even tells him, hey, man, well, he tells the older brother who gets mad, you know, he's like, why are you celebrating the younger brother when I've been here the whole time, father? I did the right things. That idiot wandered off. And the father tells the son, the older son, he's like, hey, man, everything I have is yours. You've always been with me. And it's like both sons kind of felt like they were lost or separated from the father, but they were never not the father's sons. They were always the sons of the father. And the father tells them both that. He runs to one and welcomes him home and embraces him. And the other one, he's like, dude, everything I have is yours. What do you want, man? And the coin, too. The coin never didn't belong to the woman. In fact, because it belonged, she looks even harder and more diligently for the coin. It's her coin. And the sheep was never like, that shepherd was like, forget it, man. I'm done with you. You can belong to some other shepherd or just get eaten. He's like, no, I'm going to go find that sheep. He's my sheep. And so he goes and finds him. I love that. Because it showed, like, look, most ancient religions, and actually many modern religions too, tell the story of something like, well, it's the opposite of belonging. It's like, you don't belong. You're not good enough. You have a vacancy. You have a vacuum. You have, something's missing. And you then need to figure it out, climb a ladder, do the right things, perform the right rituals, say the magic words, and then God will sort of welcome you back or fill the vacuum or or welcome you in, and then you'll belong. It's like you have to kind of do all these things and then you'll belong. But that isn't how this story goes. These three stories of the lost ones, they begin with they begin with belonging. They all begin with belonging, and the belonging is never in question. And so, what's the problem then? And the conflict in these stories is that the things that belonged and are always belonging, those things get lost as it happens. Like sometimes sons get, knuckleheaded and they wander off and they look for life and home far away from home. And then they realize, oh gosh, he comes to his senses, the text says, and they come back home. And the father is one that welcomes him back home. And so, but he never didn't belong. It's just that he wandered off. And the coin, I don't know, fell off a table. I just got lost, like happens with coins sometimes. And the sheep are prone to do, man, those sheep are just idiots. They just wander off and they get lost. And that happens to people. But the belonging, their identity of who they are and whose they are is never in question. I love the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible and the opening of the whole grand narrative. It begins with belonging. The Father, Son, and Spirit are there in the garden. The humans are there in the garden. The creation is flourishing and thriving. There's beautiful symbiosis in the story. There's everything. There's enough abundance. It's flourishing. And no one doesn't belong. It begins in belonging. And then along the way, things get askew and things wander off or try things on their own. But the belonging is never in question. So today, may you begin from a place of belonging, not of scarcity, not of out, like I'm out, I got to find my way back in. Rather, you were in, you've always been in. And sometimes, though, we get lost along the way or misplaced, or we wander off, or we search for life in the wrong places. But the problem is never on God's side. We're always the ones that belong, and God searches for us even more desperately because we belong to Him. And so may you know today that you belong. And may you sense the ever-present faithfulness of God who's coming to find you and searches all day until He finds you and then drags you back home. And may you feel that today. Okay, I love you guys. Peace.
Hey, if you enjoy this show, I'd love to have you share it with some friends. And don't forget, you are always welcome to join us in person at Central in Elk River at 8:30, which is our liturgical gathering, or at 10 o'clock, our modern gathering. Or you can check us out online at clcelkriver.org. Peace.